It's not a coincidence that many of the founders from the world's most influential companies, think Tesla, YouTube, LinkedIn, Yelp, and more, came from one small startup from the late 90s. It actually makes a ton of sense if you know the full story. I'm Sammi Cohen, and this is Social Currency, a podcast that unpacks the stories that are shaping business, culture, and the intersection of the two. This is the story of PayPal and the group of wildly ambitious people behind it who went on to build the backbone of what is today's modern Silicon Valley. They were scrappy, chaotic, and stubborn, and together they created not just companies, but an entire culture of the startup ecosystem in the Valley, one that still defines how tech startups operate today. Because this isn't just a story about processing digital payments. It's about how a small group of 20 and 30-something men, yes, they were all white and Asian men, they built a $1.5 billion exit, survived a near-death startup experience, and turned that experience into a playbook that would define the next 2 decades of tech. Let's rewind to the late 90s, when the internet still made weird dial-up noises and people were still mailing checks to pay for things that they bought on eBay. This is where two very different startups collide. Two separate companies were born right around the same idea, moving money online. The first was called Cofinity, founded by Peter Thiel and Max Levchin. And it let people send money via Palm Pilot, which feels ancient now. And for my Gen Z listeners, the Palm Pilot was basically the precursor to the smartphone. The second company was X.com, founded by a 28-year-old Elon Musk who believed that banking was broken and he wanted to reinvent it online. And yes, this company was called X, so this was the early days of his obsession with calling his businesses X, which could honestly be a whole other tangent on its own. And the two companies were direct competitors, burning through millions in venture funding to acquire users. And they were locked in a brutal race to win eBay power sellers, poaching each other's users, and even planting rumors about which company was more secure. Eventually, in early 2000, they end up merging together. And together, they become PayPal. At first, PayPal was just a tool for eBay sellers, but soon it became the default way to move money online. That simple idea, sending cash with just a click, was revolutionary. So in a world that didn't yet trust the internet, PayPal built the infrastructure of financial trust online. And within months, PayPal was onboarding thousands of new users a day. But behind all of the explosive growth, issues were already forming. There was technical debt, fraud, clashing egos, and the looming question of whether this new thing called digital payments was even legal. Really, no one had the answers. They were making it up as they went. And at one point, PayPal was losing more than $10 million a month, and no one was even sure if they were going to make payroll. And to make matters worse, the dot-com bubble was starting to burst, but inside the company, the mood actually wasn't doom and gloom. It was adrenaline. Employees worked 16-hour days and slept under their desks. They'd code until 3 a.m. and then order pizza on the company card that might just bounce in the morning. They were running on caffeine, chaos, and pure conviction that what they were doing was going to change the world. So it wasn't this glamorous picture of what we envision tech to be today. It was more of a survival mission. And the culture became so deeply tribal. It was brilliant but contrarian engineers, libertarian thinkers, and total misfits who didn't fit in at big corporations. Peter Thiel once joked that PayPal was a company built by people who couldn't actually get hired anywhere else. And in a weird way, that was true. These were people who didn't care about the rules. They cared about making an impact in their space. And then came the now famous Coup. In 2000, Elon Musk was CEO of the company. He had just raised $100 million and decided that the company should switch its core infrastructure from Unix to Microsoft. And inside the engineering team, this was mutiny. They believed that this move would break everything that the company had built. And Musk also wanted to replace the PayPal name and branding that they had worked tirelessly to build to X.com. And many of the members of the PayPal team and board were not aligned with the shift. So when Musk was on his honeymoon in Australia with his brand new wife, the board held an emergency meeting and actually fired him. And when Musk landed back on the US shores, he found out that he was out. And Peter Thiel, his coworker at the time, had stepped in as CEO. And that moment became Silicon Valley legend. And it revealed something essential about this group. They were willing to make brutal decisions in the name of survival. Under Thiel's leadership, the company stabilized, but barely. They cut costs, tightened anti-fraud systems, and doubled down on the one thing that was actually working, which was eBay sellers. Soon, PayPal became the payment option for eBay transactions, and user growth exploded. Within a year, they went public in February 2002. And just a few months after that, eBay, who was watching PayPal dominate its platform and realized that it could not beat them, bought the company for $1.5 billion in July 2002. And for context, Musk walked away with about $180 million from the sale despite being forced out. And Thiel and the other early employees became also incredibly wealthy, and this windfall would then seed all of their next ventures, creating what we now call the PayPal Mafia. It was one of the first major tech exits of the 2000s. Dozens of employees became multi-millionaires overnight. But instead of taking it easy, they kept building, and it was the beginning of something else in all of their careers. Because out of that pressure cooker became a tribe of builders who had learned to trust each other in the middle of mayhem. People who had fought through fraud, politics, and near bankruptcy and somehow still very much won. And when they left PayPal, they took that bond, the insurgent mentality, with them to whatever they did next. They didn't call themselves a mafia. Not yet, at least. But within a few years, the rest of Silicon Valley would. And over the next 5 years, the PayPal alumni fanned out across all of Silicon Valley, not to join other companies, but to build their own. And the list of what they built sounds almost impossible. Elon Musk, who'd already sold Zip2 before PayPal, doubled down with some crazy ideas. He joined Tesla and created SpaceX. Peter Thiel started Palantir and later Founders Fund, becoming one of the most influential investors in tech. Reid Hoffman founded LinkedIn and helped create the modern concept of what a professional network looks like. Max Levchin went deep into fintech again with Affirm. Jeremy Stoppelman and Russell Simmons built Yelp. Steve Chen and Chad Hurley went on to start YouTube together. David Sachs launched Yammer, sold it to Microsoft for $1.2 billion, and later co-founded Craft Ventures. It's almost mythological. Like the alumni of one company went on to build half of modern internet culture. And I just named a few of these names, but if you go and look at all of the names, it is really mind-blowing to see what all of them have been up to. And by 2007, Fortune magazine finally gave this phenomenon a name. They put around a dozen of them on their cover, dressed them in leather jackets, standing like gangsters from a Scorsese film. The headline read, "The PayPal Mafia." And honestly, the comparison fit because this wasn't some loose network of acquaintances. It was a syndicate. They backed each other's ventures, invested in each other's rounds, and recruited from the same inner circle. One founder joked that if you wanted funding in Silicon Valley during the mid-2000s, your best shot was to have a PayPal email address on your resume. And the PayPal Mafia built something beyond companies. They built the next generation of founders. They rewrote the rules of venture capital, startup culture, and how Silicon Valley thinks about success. And the ideas they carried from those early days, the speed, the loyalty, the obsession with scale, would soon ripple far beyond their small circle. So what exactly made the PayPal Mafia so different? It wasn't just that they went on to build these billion-dollar companies, it's that they built an ideology. This was a new template for how Silicon Valley would operate, because at PayPal, they didn't just survive a startup, they invented a new way to build one. And the first principle was blitzscaling. Grow fast, ask questions later. If you weren't moving at the edge of chaos, you weren't innovating. And that idea that a company should scale before they're ready, outrunning your own problems, became the dominant startup religion of the 2010s. Now, the second idea was the network effect. At PayPal, they saw firsthand how power compounds when users recruit users. That playbook became the backbone of everything from LinkedIn to YouTube to Airbnb. They realized that in the world of consumer tech, if your product couldn't grow virally, it wasn't worth building. And then there was the contrarian thinking angle, Peter Thiel's personal gospel. He taught a generation of founders to look for secrets that others were overlooking and to believe that consensus was the enemy of innovation. And that idea fueled everything from Palantir's surveillance tech to Musk's Mars obsession. But maybe the most lasting piece of PayPal's culture wasn't technical at all. It was theatrical. They turned founders into characters. Each of them became a kind of archetype, the mythic of the startup hero. Before PayPal, startup founders were engineers behind a curtain, and after PayPal, they were protagonists. And this mindset of the storytelling of the people behind the company changed everything. You can see it in how Apple turns product launches into theater, and how Elon, for better or for worse, uses Twitter/X as a stage. It's really about the power of the founder being the human face of the company. And when people talk about the PayPal Mafia, it's easy to make it sound like a list of famous names, right? Musk, Thiel, Hoffman, Levchin, a Mount Rushmore of tech founders. But that's not what makes their story so powerful. What makes it matter is what it represents. A moment in time when a small group of people believed that they could change the system, and they actually did. They weren't the most experienced or the most polished, but they were messy, argumentative, and they were often wrong. But they showed up every single day with the kind of conviction that can only exist when you have nothing to lose and everything to prove. And that's what built Silicon Valley as we know it. Not the technology, but the mentality. The idea that you can be in your 20s staring down an impossible problem and somehow convince the world to follow you anyway. That you can build something out of chaos and that the people you survive that chaos with might just become your greatest asset. And that is the real legacy of the PayPal Mafia. So whether you're building a brand, a startup, or even just a personal project, remember this. Every revolution starts with a small, slightly delusional group of people who believe in something that the rest of the world doesn't yet. And sometimes that is all it takes. And that is a wrap for today's episode of Social Currency. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I respond to every single comment that I see. So thanks for listening, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Social Currency. I've been wanting to launch this show for so long. I can't tell you how excited I am to do this and how thrilled I am that you're actually here listening. It means the world to me. If you liked what you heard today, please rate and review the podcast because it massively helps to support the work I do to bring the show to life. And if you want to keep up with the hottest business lore in real time, follow me on Instagram at Sammi Cohen Talks and subscribe to my newsletter, Social Currency, which is linked in the show notes. Social Currency is a production of Social Currency Media and Money News Network. The podcast is hosted and executive produced by me, Sammi Cohen. Social Currency is produced by the Money News Network team. See you next time.